Hi friends, this is Caitlin, and today I'm so excited to show you a brand new clear stamp release from Sweet November Stamps, and they have been kind enough to help me do a giveaway for you. We're going to take a look at the whole release, and I'm just going to go in size order. First up, we have the Spookville expansion pack, then a wee bit of magic with these super adorable little wizards. Next is the Happy Halloween with a couple werewolves and their little accessories, and I love that there's so many different moon size and shape options with all these sets. Then we have a Little Wicked, which are these really unique, almost folk style witches. Then Midnight's Halloween Adventures, I love him inside that jack-o'-lantern. Next is my personal favorite set, Brewing Up Some Fun, which I'll be using on my project today. Then we have these adorable ghosts from Ghostly Greetings, I love the size of these. And last but not least, we have the Spookville Horizon lines, which are slimline size scene builders that can be layered together or used on their own. The expansion pack was made to fit the scale of these perfectly, and when you layer them up, the pads line up together. So awesome. I love that you can mix and match these and really create whatever background you want. So for our giveaway here, a random winner will be getting the Spookville Horizon lines, the expansion pack, and the Brewing Up Some Fun sets, care of Sweet November Stamps. To enter to win, make sure you are subscribed to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. It's that easy. The winner will be picked at 6 p.m. Eastern on Monday, September 20th, and will be announced shortly after on my Instagram page, which is also Caitlin Annalie Cards. There is an Instagram hop for a giveaway for the whole release also happening this weekend on the Sweet November Stamps Instagram, so make sure you check that out, and I'll leave a link for their page in the description box below. This is the project we're making today, which is actually a 4x6 panel so that it can be framed, and I'm so excited to share the process of Copic coloring the scene with you. We're going to have a lot of fun. So I already have my images all stamped out, and I'm going in with a T-ruler to mark out where the back of the shelf or table where all of my little critters and their bottles are sitting. You could definitely eyeball this, but it's less stressful for me to just use a ruler, and I'm going in with a lighter shade than what my shelf will be at the end. I've had a lot of requests to show how I color in stone and brick walls, so I thought this would be the perfect scene to do that with. I'm going in with a light gray marker and sketching out my mortar lines first, which is the space between the rocks. I'm using light markers for these first two steps so they're easier to cover if I change my mind about anything later on. And I'm making it pretty freeform, but you can also do the same steps with a rectangular brick shape depending on the look you're going for. If you do decide to do bricks, keep in mind the golden ratio for those is 1 by 1.5. So if your bricks were an inch tall, they would be about an inch and a half long. Now this isn't a hard rule by any means, but it does look super nice to the eye, and it's definitely something good to keep in mind. You can see that I'm going in where any rocks meet and rounding out the mortar. This just gives a more realistic look to how real mortar would sit between the stones, especially these very round ones that I'm drawing out. You want to be mindful about how thick you draw your mortar as well. If it's too thin or too thick, it won't look realistic. You want it to look like it's enough to hold together a wall, but you don't want huge swatches of mortar for tiny little pebbles. I'm going over my lines with a dark marker now that I feel confident in the design. This is where you could change things up if you wanted, and the light marker would be covered up in the next shading steps. I drew out all of my rocks even behind the clear glass bottles with that light marker before, and when I go in with this darkest gray, I will not be coloring those spots so that they appear lighter and like the image is being filtered through the glass. Please keep in mind that this video has definitely been sped up. I do not color this fast in real life. And if you want a better look at what colors I use for each area, they will all be listed in the description box below for you as usual. For my wall, I decided to use the neutral grays, but these could be swapped out with whatever neutrals you have or like best. I'm going in with a shade lighter than the mortar lines and starting to create the shading on one side of the rocks. For this panel, I chose the top right as my light source, so all of the shadows will be the heaviest on the bottom left. I add the shadow to the whole left side and across the bottom of each stone, and then thicken up the corner the most. The best thing about these rocks is that you don't have to worry about messy strokes. It'll just add to the rough texture, which is great for the scene anyway. I'm using big flicking motions with the side of my marker to just shade in and get the idea that these rocks are rounded and 3D, and so one side is cast in shadow where the light just isn't hitting it as much. I'm avoiding the space behind the glasses with this color, but moving forward I will use each color to fill in the space of the step before it where the glass is. So the N2 will be used where we would have put the N4 if we hadn't skipped that step. So now I'm going in with the medium color and blending over the dark and filling in about 3/4 of each stone using the same messy strokes but with the side of the marker, leaving some white space in that upper right corner. Then I go in with my lightest shade to fill in that area. You could leave some or all of this white if you wanted a lot more contrast, but I felt it was too stark for how colorful the scene was going to be in the end. But that's the fun thing with this kind of scene. You can really play around with what you do and see how it affects the overall look and really change it up depending on how whimsical or serious you want your overall look to be. There are a couple of details that I like to add to my rock walls just to step them up a notch. One is going in with the same medium marker I used and stippling in some extra texture over the dark and medium areas. This just ups the rocky, rough texture. Then I like to go in with a dark marker and add in some cracks. You want to make sure that these kind of have a rounded Y shape to them and really have fun lightning bolting them out a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the best way I can describe it, kind of creating that shattered look. The last thing is stippling on some green moss or even slimy drips if that's your style. I just think this helps to break up all that gray and add a little flair and color to the piece. The next thing I wanted to tackle was the wood grain on the shelf holding the images. I decided to stick with my approach of sketching out my design with a light marker first, and I think that adding at least one knot in the wood really helps to sell the effect versus just having a bunch of wavy lines. I'm also avoiding drawing through the middle of my sentiment, kind of working around it instead. Just like before, I use the light marker to continue my lines behind the glass up to the liquid line so that I have a map of what to shade there later as well. Once I feel good about the layout, I go in with a dark brown and trace over all of those lines. I also add shading from both edges of the paper towards the center so that we kind of get a vignette or spotlight effect on the main characters. This just kind of helps to tell your eye where to focus first. I usually try to keep really light pressure on my marker with that dark color so that I can keep my lines nice and thin and preserve the detail of the design later on, with the exception of the shading on the edges. Then I go in with my medium shade and I can use a heavier hand and really start to fill in the gaps on either side of the dark lines and bring that edge shading in closer to the center. The last step is to fill in the remaining space with the lightest shade and start to smooth everything out a little bit. It's really cool how all of this comes together, and what it once seemed like a huge white space that would be so hard to fill is now almost all the way colored in. I'm using the lightest shade from the main table and then one additional shade lighter to fill in the wood grain behind the glass, so again we get that filtered look. Then I'm going over the glass areas with BG11 and BG10, which I think are the perfect glass shades and help to soften and blend all of the different colors behind them. I'm trying to add some subtle shading in with BG11 where some of the main curves would be in the glass, but this kind of effect is something I'm still trying to learn more about and experiment with. Also, later on, we'll be adding in some highlights over the glass with a white gel pen, and that to me is really what helps sell that glass effect. Next, I'm going in with my E70s to color the bat. I love using these shades for bats, and I think they're really fun and whimsical because they give that purple undertone and it's something different. I wanted to let his head look really fuzzy compared to his smooth wings, so I played up that texture by using little flicks around his face, and then went in with my medium and lighter shades as usual, working from my darkest to my lightest. Just kind of gives me more control and I think gives me a smoother blend. But as I've said before, if you are still newer to Copics, definitely play around with which order you color in. I know a lot of people will go lightest to darkest and then back up to lightest. It's all just personal preference and about finding what works for you. For the cork stoppers on these little bottles, I really wanted to play up the speckled look that they would have, and so I colored them in with lots of little dots, just kind of stippling in each layer. I know these kinds of little details can seem silly, but they really help to fill out the whole scene and make everything look detailed and cohesive altogether. I wasn't sure what colors I was going to do for all of the liquids or even the lizard when I started out. I just knew that I really wanted it to be colorful. I decided that I wanted the spider bottle to be this purpley blue using the B60s. I had to do 2 layers because that jump from the B63 to the 60 is pretty big, and once you have that first layer down, the colors blend a lot easier and a lot more smoothly since the paper is already saturated. I colored in the spider with dark grays and then moved on to the toothy bottle. As soon as I had colored in the spider bottle, I knew that I wanted to use a variation of the traditional Halloween triadic color scheme of purple, green, and orange. And I like the idea of having a traditional green lizard as well, so I made this bottle a light orangey yellow. It probably would have made sense to color the teeth orange too, since they're in the liquid and probably would be tinted by it, but I really wanted them to stand out, so I made them a soft creamy color with some E markers instead. Next up was that adorable lizard, and my favorite thing about him are his surprised eyebrows. Amy just creates so much expression and character in her drawings, and that's what makes them so fun to color for me. I wanted to keep the lizard bright and fun like the rest of the drawing, and so I went in with some YG markers and added an extra bright pop to his belly. Then I went back in over the darker and medium areas with some dots to give him more of a scaly look. I cannot wait to color this little lizard up again, and I think my next project with him, I'm going to try some selective masking and see if I can give him like a big witch hat and have him riding on a broom or something, because his expression is so funny to me. I just want to use him over and over. So at this point I figured I already had over half the rainbow covered, so I might as well just finish out the whole group, and I went with yellow liquid and some really funny red eyeballs. Which are not realistic at all, but they just make me laugh. They're just so funny. Something about this whole scene is just so funny. Like some super evil, terrible person is like working in their lab, or some evil witch is like concocting her evil spell to do super danger, and these are like the little critters that are like running amok behind her. They're so funny. Okay, so the last step is going to be going in with the white gel pen to add highlights to the bottles and the cracks in the rocks. So as that's happening, I'm going to go over the giveaway info one more time. To enter for a chance to win your own set of the stamps that I used today, as well as the scene builder and the expansion pack, make sure that you're subscribed to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment before 6 p.m. Eastern on September 20th. Thank you so much to Sweet November Stamps for letting me give away these stamps. And while I am on the design team and I did get these stamps for free for myself, there was no expectation from them that I would make this video and show the full collection to you. I did that because I truly love the product. Today also marks the start of my October Eve series, so for the next 13 days, keep an eye out for a new Halloween or fall-inspired card every day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great day, and happy crafting.